Hey everyone, Margarita here. I'm going to talk in this video about the attorney who was put on my criminal case in Monroe County, Michigan. This video piggybacks off of the last several videos that I had released regarding how the charges were a setup in the first place. There were many different people involved in that, and some of the information I have not released yet due to the fact that these are all very serious crimes. This is all organized crime, and this ties in with the decades of crimes my mother's involved with. So a lot of these details I have left out for the time being, and I will come back and talk about more of each of these situations down the line. Now in this video, this is going to be its own playlist because there will be more videos regarding this matter. And I'm just going to release some of the information now. And once matters make it a little further down the line, I'll come back and talk more about this, because this situation actually went on for about 7 or 8 months. And there's a lot of information that I was able to gather in that 7 or 8 month period. So I'm just going to talk about an outline of some of these things that were going on and some of the information that I gathered, and I'll go further into detail down the line. And then once arrests are made, I'll talk fully about all of it. And I do want to state that in this video, everything I'm saying is facts. Everything I've said in every video is facts. I have proof of most of what I've been saying, and if I don't have the proof in hand on a lot of what I've said in these videos, I do know where to find it because it does exist. None of this is fabricated whatsoever. These are all 100% facts. So the attorney that I'm talking about that took my criminal case in Monroe, his name is Michael Anthony Karman. And in this video, we're going to refer to him as Tony Baloney, because everything he had done and said from the time that he got my case to the end of everything was all baloney. Everything he was up to, everything he was talking about, all his actions, everything going on, it was all baloney. So that's why we're going to call him Tony Baloney. And he does go by the name Tony. So now he does take court-appointed cases regularly. However, during this time that he got my case, and mine was in Monroe County, Michigan, he had just recently got put on the Monroe court system to take court-appointed cases, whereas previously he was taking the majority of his cases in Wayne County, Michigan. So he had just gotten put on that, and then also he had removed himself from taking cases in Monroe just after he had gotten my case. So these are actually part of the red flags on what was going on. It's one of two things that happened. It's either that he got the case already and took my case, and then my mother and her criminal group and the people that Tony is also involved with, because he had previously been involved with all of these people. He'd known them all for some years. So it was either he got the case and then they approached him and bribed him to insert himself into my life and cause further problems in my life and attempt to take me out so that they can gain access to the rest of the missing stolen trust fund. And many ways in which he was trying to take me out. So I'll talk about that in a second. The other option would have been that he only got put on the Monroe court system dockets because he wanted to take the case specifically. They had already bribed him, and he got put on there specifically to take the case. So it's one of the two. Either way, he took the bribe. I don't know exactly how much money it was, but I would say somewhere between like $8,000 and $15,000 they would have had to pay him to take this, to do what he was doing, with promises of more payment in the future once the job was complete. Hold on one second. Okay, so I have a lot of notes regarding this because this was so long term, and I've already had to refilm the video a couple times because there's just so much information, and I want to be able to get some of the most important information into the video. Now, the ways in which they were planning on taking me out, now this is everybody who's ever been involved in my mother and her criminal group coming towards me to take me out in order for them to gain access to the missing stolen trust fund. This is what they all do, but this is what he was attempting to do. So the goal was to get me incarcerated long-term, deceased, deemed mentally incompetent, or in this situation, they could have told him that I was broke and desperate, never made it in life, and I'm a gold digger, and it would be easy to schmooze me and marry me. Um, and then my mother may also additionally have documents that say I'm mentally incompetent, which if she does, they're falsified because she worked in the medical system. She's been playing these games for decades, pulling off these crimes for decades. So I guess the other option would have been to marry me, and then he would have been able to help them gain access to the rest of the missing stolen trust fund by showing that like he's my spouse would be the other option. So it could have been any of these or all of these, or it could have started in one direction, and then when he realized it wasn't going to work, he traveled into the next option, because there was many options attempted during the course of these months. So initially, I was red flagged right away during the initial phone conversation that I had with him the very first time I talked to him. Some of the information that he said just red flagged me that this is a potential person that's being paid to insert themselves into your life. And if you've watched my other videos, you'll know that my mother has paid many people to insert themselves into my life and or gather information on me or cause problems in my life. And it's been going on for decades. So every move that I make in life, and I've been having to operate this way for over 20 years, every move that I make, I have to anticipate that anybody could potentially be one of these people. So right away during that phone call, the probability was way over 50% that he was involved, and I just continued to talk to him. So throughout the course of some months, we were messaging back and forth numerous times because he had my court situation and was the attorney on the case. Then I had to explain mine and my son's medical condition, what we had been through. We're permanently disabled. We have limited modified lives. We've been through years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in treatment out of pocket. We were completely incapacitated for about 3 years and homebound and lost 5 years. And we were just starting to piece a little bit of daily functioning back together when the 2021 Ford gas spill hit, and I was abruptly forced from my home. And then because my mother's criminal actions inserting herself in the gas spill, I was then forced home to live with my brain bleeding. My son was living with his brain bleeding. We were in and out of consciousness, and I was forced to purchase my home down in Ohio, which took about 8 months for me to get down there. To get us to safety, so that we're temporarily away from our main home. And this all had to be explained to him because at this point, we're still treating the initial medical emergency. We should still be treating 4 to 5 days per week. And right now we're on a break because we've had to spend so much out of pocket. And because of the gas bill and us not being able to travel through it, we had to drop it down to 1 to 2 treatments per week for some time. And so the amount of treatments going forward all still needs to be resumed going forward, to help remove the rest of the carbon monoxide from our systems and seal the rest of the brain tissue shut, because the treatment does both. So he was given all this information up front, because him being the attorney on the case. And then he did tell me that he was also poisoned by carbon monoxide at one point a couple of years prior. He had a 1-day poisoning, not an extreme situation the way my son and I did. We have the worst case scenario possible where the people got to live and have what little quality of life we have today, and lost all of those years. And if it weren't for my life's work and my own merits, we would have never even recovered. We wouldn't have survived, and we wouldn't have any quality of life still. So him comparing his situation to our situation is nothing, because he didn't go through anything like what we did, and he's not left permanently injured in the which way we were, and suffering and struggling through life. And we were also left without treatment in the traditional medical system initially, which is how we ended up at the private center. So several times he did try to compare him being poisoned by carbon monoxide during a one-time ordeal, not with any brain injuries, not giving birth while suffering from it, acquiring brain injuries, not having a child suffering from it, not having extreme continuous symptoms and massive brain swelling and 50, 60 severe symptoms at once for years on end with no relief, and then still treating that. Where we were in this point, we were still treating that, but our treatments had tapered off due to all of these circumstances that had happened to us and how much we had already spent. Because at this point, we had spent well over $100,000 out of pocket on top of what my private insurance had spent. So there were numerous times he tried to compare his poisoning to ours, and it's not even a comparable situation. Now, this information had to be given to him because I'm not able to do all these additional things that like courts order you to do. It was bad enough. I was already given a blower, excuse me, a blower that I was supposed to blow into every 4 hours because of the brain injuries and the amount of no rest, no recovery, no proper treatment, just struggling through life the entire time of my injury. I couldn't be woken up. So here I was given this blower as well, and it was disrupting my sleep. I also don't have time. Like I don't have days. I don't have like my body's not on a schedule. My brain's not on a schedule. Neither is my son's. There's nothing we can do about it. We were left to die in a very extreme state, struggling through every second of every day. And when you're in that state, time doesn't matter. What other people want you to do doesn't matter. It's not optional. So we were just coming out of the extreme part of all of this. We were still very fragile. All of these were still very serious issues. And I had to tell him all of this. My son had never been, he didn't even get to leave home until he was 5.5 years old for the first time. And I can't just leave him with random people because of our condition being so severe. We can't have any amounts of carbon monoxide. Other people don't know that. There are small amounts everywhere in many vehicles, in many buildings, throughout traffic and whatnot. So he could also just not be left random places with random people either. So there isn't just random babysitters or like our lives are very modified and we're having to accommodate all of this. So I was giving him this information because I knew they were going to try to order me to do all this stuff that I knew I couldn't do. And because of the way we were left untreated and my mother's criminal actions regarding that and the way we had to go about seeking treatment and getting the treatment, and we were in such an extreme state, we don't have proper medical documentation along the way. We now have some, but we weren't able to get any during those first several years because of how extreme it was. We couldn't chase down medical documents, nor did we have somebody who actually seen what we were going through or understood it fully, except for Charmaine, who was then brought in at the beginning of 2020 and had physically saw what we were actually going through and how close to death we were. So now that plays a role because when this all went to court, he did not turn over what medical documents I was able to obtain at this point, which was just a few. And he didn't turn them into the court. So I was ordered to do a bunch of things that I couldn't do. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do them because I couldn't even incorporate daily functioning. Some of the things that you have to do within a home to keep your life running, couldn't even do that at this point. And I had other people working for me for the previous 2 years up until that point. And that was the reason my household was still able to run, why I was still able to produce money, because I was producing a lot of it and I just couldn't do anything else. So that was the only reason I was able to get those things done during those times, but I knew they were going to order me to do all this stuff that wasn't able to be incorporated into my life. And now here I've got this blower that's disrupting my sleep. And because of how I was making my money and I'm in the adult entertainment industry, there's no clocks, there's no time. It's a very fast paced industry. And there was like people buy hours and half hours and you have to go by that, and people pay high dollar amounts for those. There's no way for me to like clock the time and disrupt what we're doing at work when all this is going on and say like, oh, I have to go blow in this blower. So there was a lot of issues with that on top of the brain injuries and me not having daily functioning or time or like saying I have to do this at this time or this at that time that had never been put back into our lives from the initial medical emergency. So he was not comprehending any of this was going on for us. But then, we go to court. It got dragged out for several months, and the blower was becoming a really serious issue because it could have been reduced down to like twice a day or something, especially because of my condition. And I don't have a history of substance abuse or alcoholism, but because of my mother's crimes and the falsification of all these criminal records and all these criminal charges she's been able to get put on me throughout the course of my life, it doesn't look that way on paper, but that's truly my situation. And I had not even been able to drink for several years leading up into this. So, and again, the whole DUI was a setup. So I will get to that in the future. Watch the last few videos. The whole thing was a setup. I've just left out some of the important details at this point. But so this all goes on. And he's starting to text me back and forth quite a bit, which I thought was kind of odd. And I'm thinking like, that's interesting that he's like texting me this much. And at the same time, my dad had just had his injury. My life was very chaotic. And I wasn't even able to get back home during the week. I was sleeping on my friend's couch and coming home for the weekend so I could work the little bit that I was. And he was trying to get me to go out and party and drink and such, and like sending me pictures and messages and trying to get me to party. And while I have this blower as well, but not only that, that's not even something that I do. So I had pictures and I had some messages and I had a lot of this. But at one point, toward the end of all this, when he realized what was actually going on and there was somebody documenting his behavior and all of his crimes, he was able to wipe my phone. So he did eventually put something on my phone where it was monitoring things, because he was able to wipe it without it in his hands. So I don't have any of this to show, but at some point down the line, I did begin messaging him again to kind of get some more information and some proof down the line sporadically. So I'll talk about that in other videos in the future. But in the beginning, there was just many red flags. And so that was the start of the red flags, the texts, the messages trying to get me to go out and drink, and like cheersing in all these videos and pictures, and like offering to pay for drinks if we come out. Like I don't even do that. And then I guess people assume because I work in the restaurant, bar, entertainment industry that that's just part of my life. No, I work in that industry. I run business. I generate money. I'm not there partying. So people have that misconstrued. And then there was somebody else who my mother had paid to insert themselves into my life at one point. Some of what I experienced when I crossed paths with that guy briefly, you could tell he brought some information back to the criminal group who was attempting to gain access to this trust fund, that some of what Tony Baloney was doing, that information came from that guy. So I'll get more into this in the future, and maybe at some point I can retrieve some of these missing messages and pictures, but I will get there down the line. So that went on for some time. And then what I did was, it was approaching Memorial Weekend. And Memorial Weekend is slow for me in the entertainment industry. There's several holidays that are slow, and then it's slow during January. So at that time, what I did was, because he just kept texting me and wanting me to go out, I'm like really red flag that he's in on this, and I need further information. And if you watch my last couple of videos, I talk about how I did go out with some of these people who basically told on themselves and they were part of this, and I gathered information further that way. So that's what I was doing in this situation. I then invited him to my work, where he showed up at the one place that I'd been at long term in Ohio, which means he crossed state lines from Michigan, came into Ohio, and came to my place of employment. So now you've crossed state lines. And that was kind of one of the tests, like, well, is he really stupid enough to cross state lines and do all this, or is he not involved, or we'll see. So, I mean, he went and did it anyway. And as soon as he got there, within 30 to 60 minutes, I would say, he gave off several red flags that he was involved in all of this. One of them was, because prior to this, I had just transferred half of my home, the deed of half of my home, into my youngest child's name from my ex's name, because my ex's name was never supposed to be on the home. It was due to my injuries that his income had to be used, and why his name was even on the home. It was 100% all of my money, and it was all of my work, and he was never even supposed to be on the home. This is what I've been doing as a single individual for many years prior, and it was a forced relationship due to my mother's crimes. So I had to get his name off the home, got it in my son's name. Or I needed to get it all into my name, but the best option would be to put the other half in my younger son's name, because of how sick and injured I am, and I walk a very fine line between life and death. It's just going to be easier that way. That way, the home stays out of probate court, and it would just all go to my younger son. So that's why I chose to do it that way and not put it in my name, his half in my name. But I said that I had just done all that, and I did it all myself. So many people know that I run a lot of different businesses over the course of time. I do a lot of different types of paperwork, legal paperwork, all types of paperwork. I've worked with different broken systems and such, and it's all due to the criminal harassment and what my mother's caused all throughout the course of my life. So I'm very knowledgeable about all these different systems and all these different types of paperwork. So I did do the deed transfer myself. And we were talking about this shortly after he got there, and um, he repeated it several times. Like, he was very confused that I did this myself. So right then and there, you could tell his perspective, or he was assuming that I was just some dumb stripper, and that's all I have going on in my life, and that I shouldn't know how to do all these things, or that I wouldn't know how to do transfer a deed into my name or into my son's name. But he repeated it several times, basically letting me know that he perceives me to not be very smart, or I shouldn't know how to do all this other stuff. And really, I've been doing taxes for other people since 2009. So he wasn't comprehending that I'd always had numerous streams of income since I was a teenager, and I'd been building success from the ground up since I was about 16 years old is when I started having numerous streams of income, but I started working way before that. And that I'm 100% self-made, self-built. So the only thing I had said initially was that I was an entertainer. I didn't talk about any of my other streams of income or anything else I had going on in my life. And I don't tell anybody any of those things ever. So that's just how I kept it. And he just assumed that that's all I had going on. So when he told on himself immediately about just thinking I shouldn't know how to do that, or I'm just so dumb. Then he did several other things while he was there. You could tell that when I went on stage each time, he was running off into the bathroom to either place a phone call or place some texts to whoever was guiding him and directing him and giving him information about me. Because it may not have been my mother directly, it was probably the group she's involved with and some of those people he's affiliated with. So you could tell by the arrogance in his walk when I went on stage and he walked off to the bathroom, the way he was adjusting his pants and the way he was walking, you could tell that he arrogantly was thinking like, aha, I got her. Oh, I got her. Now this is going to be so easy. But you could tell by the way he walked and the way he kicked his leg and adjusted his pants that that's what he was thinking. But I didn't say any of this. I didn't let him know any of this. I've never told anybody this. This is the first time this information is coming out. Some of this information. The only other person who has this information is Charmaine, because she was documenting it every step of the way. But because there's so many mirrors in these establishments, I wasn't looking directly at them, but there's mirrors everywhere, so I can see different angles without turning around. And so I was able to see that. And you could tell he just assumed that I made this low amount of money. And then because it was a slow holiday, the place was slow, which is why I invited him there. Otherwise, I would have never did that. It's usually very busy. It's very fast paced. There's usually a lot of money flowing. And this particular night, it was very slow. So he just assumed that I made very low amounts of money and such. And at some point, he also assumed that I couldn't afford my home, the home that I've had for 8.5 years. He assumed I couldn't afford my bills, couldn't afford my home. And that's why I was staying at my small home in Ohio, because the city and the general area gave the all clear from Ford's gas bill, and it was not all clear. We were living in a medical emergency with our brain tissue open. We don't have the protective barrier. It's not all clear, and it took 2 years to clear. So that's why we were down at my other house. Had nothing to do with me being able to afford it. If that were the case, how would I be able to afford to pay cash for a whole other home and remodel it out of pocket? That makes no sense. So if I really couldn't afford my home, why would I have that much money to do all that? But you could tell that he just thought I made some small amount of money based on what he saw that day going on in the establishment, and then what he had been told about why I was temporarily, or he didn't believe that it was temporary. He just thought I really lived down in the small home in Ohio, and I had to leave my home up here just because I couldn't afford it and I never made it in life. And that's the information that was being relayed to him from the group of people. With at the root my mother. So this all kind of went on, that very within the hour. And then he stayed for several hours, and he seemed to think that the rules there didn't apply to him. He didn't seem to understand strip club etiquette either, and just assumed it was like a low paying position, or like I bowed down to these people or something, or it doesn't really add up to reality, what's actually going on here. Now, at one point, he ended up kissing me inside of the establishment, which is extremely not allowed. And he just felt entitled to do so. Now, at this time, because the bouncer even walked up and had to say something, because you can't do that. Nobody's allowed to do that. So at this point, what he was doing is he was attempting to try to insert himself into my life so he could carry out the agenda and the plan so they can gain access to the rest of this trust fund. But he's got to make it so that I'm wanting to talk to him again or talk to him outside of here. And so that's kind of where it all started. And, if someone, comes at you and kisses you, that would make you think that they're interested in you. Otherwise, why would they do that? But again, I was already red flagged months prior to this, and I'm slowly picking up on what's actually going on. So now I'm like heavily playing along, gathering the information, bringing it back to Charmaine, and had been every step of the way. So, that alerted me that there's more to this. He's trying to do something else, and I'm trying to figure it out. Also, I do believe that this group of people, including my mother, has told him that I probably exchanged sex for money, and that's how I go about my business, and that has nothing to do with anything regarding this industry. That's all stereotyping, and that's all made up. So I think he assumed that at one point as well. So I'll talk more about that in the future. But then I end up coming to his house for dinner a few days after this. Okay, so then when I get there, there's more red flags just that first time. So more red flags. It pertained to we were talking, and he was basically asking me different questions or trying to verify this or that. And much of what I said throughout the course of all this time, most of it's facts. Um, I would say certain things just to see his response on certain things along the way. And I do that to a lot of people, not just him, but I did do that quite a bit along the way. But the majority of what I said were all facts. Everything's true. And if it wasn't something that was factual, it was something dumb, not really pertaining to anything I have going on in reality. So um, now, one of the things that he said was, after that series of questions, he led it into who are my parents? So, who are my parents? Mind you, I have gone out plenty of times with many different people over the course of my life because of my entertainment business. And let's just say prior to my injury, because this isn't really able to happen since my injury in the last 10 years, but prior to my injury, there were times where I would go out with certain individuals. I'm very selective regarding this. And the majority of the time we're going out to dinner, we're going out to casinos and whatnot. We're not, it's not like an exchange of money for sex. We're going out and having a good time type thing, or we're going out in a group and it's numerous people, it's numerous of us. Um, so, I told him that I don't really date, or I told him that I've been single the majority of my adult life. So he took that as that I'm naive and I don't know a lot about, behaviors in dating, or how things should go in a relationship, or this or that. But the reality is, due to my entertainment business and how I used to operate prior to my injury, I had been out many times with many people. It's just, we're not dating. There's an exchange of money for a good time, and we're out usually gambling or eating dinner. And he didn't realize that I'd been out with many people many times. We talk a lot about whatever and whoever it is, and we exchange information like this. And then throughout the course of me working in that industry, the amount of people I've talked to, and then the people I have dated in my actual life. However, I'm usually single, and that's how I've ran my entire adult life, and I provide everything for myself. I keep my entire life separate. And unless they're a soulmate, or there's a possibility that this person is equally yoked to me and is building what I am building, and it's a compatible situation for a long-term relationship, then I don't engage in anything other than something short or sweet. And I don't have much time on my hands to engage in anything beyond that. So he assumed, by a lot of the things he said and did, he assumed that because I'd been single the majority of my adult life, that I wouldn't know a lot about what he was doing or trying to do, or these tactics he was using. He just thought that I wouldn't recognize he's trying to put on a fake relationship. So, when he asked me the question about who are my parents, I really thought back to like every person I've ever talked to over the course of my adult life. Nobody's ever asked me that in that manner. And that's not even how you would ask it. But the reason that happened is because on the stolen missing trust fund, because I was a minor when it was left to me, it states my parents' names because of how the trust was left in the legal documents. That's why he asked it that way. So that was another really big red flag that he is in on this. And then at one point he said something along the lines of how he was trying to make himself look like somebody. I forget like who it was. I don't know if it was like an actor or something. He said he changed his hair to make himself look like somebody, and I can't remember who it was though. but I did notice like he had only changed his appearance to try to get me interested in him. Um, and he must have been told that, or the people told him what they think I might be interested in or something, and then he changed his appearance to match something they thought I would be interested in, and then he didn't maintain that appearance. He just did it like that one time. So that was another really big red flag, and I caught this literally all on that first day. And so I just brought this information back to Charmaine, and then that was kind of it. So now when it comes to him thinking I'm naive about like relationships or dating or how things should be, or whatever's going on, another thing he did not take into consideration is the fact that I've been in the entertainment industry for 20 years. And not only that, but I waitressed and bartended prior to that as well. And those two industries I had, they overlapped. But being in that industry and the amount of times I've gone out with people, and like how I operate in my life, because I've always been extremely busy. I've always operated like been building 2 to 3 times as fast as the average individual. And so I don't have all this extra spare time. It doesn't mean I'm naive to how things should be when you're in a relationship or when you're dating. I just choose not to participate in that because I do very well for myself by myself, and I don't have time to play games. I don't have time to waste. I don't waste time dating people for fun. I don't just go out for fun. I'd have casual relationships with people here or there when I had some spare time, but it was never anything serious. And if I was going to enter into a relationship with somebody, it would be somebody who could be equally yoked to me and build what I'm building. And understand the injuries that I'm now suffering from and going forward and what I have to deal with regarding that. Because in the last 10 years since I've been injured, that significantly changes things for me. So I really don't have time to play games. So this guy is a really big time waster also. But now when it comes to that, he still wasn't taking into consideration my life experience with the amount of time I spent in the entertainment industry, and even whether I'm like in the establishments talking with people and whatnot and dancing with people, or outside the handful of times that I'd go out with the very select few people that I would go out with outside of there from time to time, because it was not something frequent. He was not taking into consideration how I operate and what you would have to do in order to actually date me. Like you would have to be able to cover all your expenses the way you normally do. You would have to also be able to cover everything that I cover on my own. You would have to be able to add to what I've built by myself. And so he took this in a whole other direction, just believing this false narrative and operating on this false narrative. He was given this information about me, and none of it's how I operate, none of it's reality. When I go out with people, if I choose to go out with somebody, you would have to cover everything every single time. And you would also, if you want me to miss work, you would also have to pay me what I would have made at work. Now, that has happened many times where I'd get to know, because I've worked at numerous establishments for long periods of time. So I'd get to know some of the regular people who would visit frequently, and we'd become friends. And it'd usually be a group of us who would become friends long term. And we would go out for so and so's birthday here or there, not within the establishment. We would go places, go to a nightclub here or there, get a booth here or there, whatever. We would do all that. So if I were to miss work, you would then have to cover everything I would make at work, which is large sums of money. So in the place I was at this time, I was generally making $500 to $1,500 a night, sometimes up to $2,500 in a night, occasionally. So at no time did he ever try to do any of those things or match what my requirements are to actually date me. He just made all these assumptions that I was on a bottom feeder, I'm a gold digger, I'm on the bottom level, never made it in life, don't make much money, or whatever he thought, and just assumed I was extremely desperate because I was single, when it's really the exact opposite. So the people who fed him this information, you guys look stupid as fuck. Now, and that's logical. So if you look at like Cardi B, you look at like some of these other big entertainers that work in the larger clubs that have a lot more cash flow. And you got to think, I was working in Ohio and I still had pretty good cash flow for the amount of, nights I was working. But you go to those bigger clubs, and it's known that dancers operate in that manner. You are not going to be taking a dancer out of a club and offering her like breadcrumbs, you're not going to be, or not offering anything at all, or offering breadcrumbs, you would not ever be doing that. No dancer would ever agree to do that. So these are all really big red flags, because he assumed all these things and just like thought I was naive to the whole dating thing, when no, like I'm like way up here. I'm not down here at all. I've been way up here for decades. And so in order to be a part of my life, or even if you wanted to spend one night with me, or a group of people did, and they wanted, let's say there's like 3 guys and it's somebody's birthday, and then it's me and a couple of my friends, then yes, you would have to pay for everything for us to go anywhere with you, and you'd have to pay for our time off to miss work. And so that this is a really big mistake that he had made throughout the course of these several months. Because like I said, like if I was going to be serious with somebody, they would have to match my level of life of what I've achieved on my own. And mind you, I've had to rebuild from nothing 3 solid times, been completely wiped out down to nothing 3 solid times, rebuilt from nothing, got it all out of the mud myself. So the fact that I am still where I am today after all of that and everything I've been through, and then my injuries and everything I've spent out of pocket, that's absurd. You'd have to be pretty high up on the chain. Now, hold on one second. Okay, so yeah. Now, the other thing is, I also don't combine with others. The only person I've ever combined like expenses or like a household with is my baby daddy. And it's because we've known each other since we were teenagers. And we were not even together until my youngest was born 10 years ago. We have a 20-year-old daughter together. We weren't together the entire time. And the reason we ended up together is because of my mother's criminal escapades. So the only person that I've ever combined finances and resources with was him. And then even when the relationship split, like he still doesn't pay child support. We just have our own agreement on like I keep his benefits and whatnot through work. And especially because of my injuries, I can't just get those benefits on my own. Because a lot of insurance companies won't insure me for numerous reasons due to those injuries. And you know, we had the house together, which that he then signed over to the youngest child. But then we had a couple of vehicles together. We do still jointly own them, and one is paid off. One is almost paid off at this point. But regarding those matters, ever in my life, I've never combined that with anybody ever, and I've never looked to, and I'm not going to, unless you can provide for me what I stated in the previous few minutes. And you can cover all of this on your own, then that's never going to happen. I would never do that with anybody. So, he just really thought I was naive when it comes to all of these different things within a relationship. I've literally talked to thousands, if not like, really like tens of thousands, if not 100,000 or more people over the 20 years I've been in just in the entertainment industry. So no, I'm not naive to how things should be, and whatnot. I legitimately know how things are supposed to be. So all from the beginning, I knew he was putting on an entire like fake relationship. And I knew it had to do with the missing stolen trust fund, and it was his own actions that just kept telling on himself. So what I kept doing was giving him more rope, and he would just keep hanging himself with the rope that I would give him, and I would just sit back and collect the information and just calmly sit back and like gather everything he was saying, and he just kept telling on himself. So that's what went on the majority of this entire time that this kept going on. And originally, the very first time or two I came to his house, he was trying to impress me with his home because it's on the water, it's on Lake Erie or whatever. But really, his daddy land contracted him the home. I've worked for my home and all of my homes and everything I have. Nobody's ever helped me. And he was trying to impress me with the home that he had or where it is, when mine is actually like bigger and better. And it's nicer. It has like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things, but he did not see that home. He only saw my small home in Ohio and thought that that was my life. He didn't believe anything I was saying about, I'm temporarily gone. I'll be back to my home, in a few months, whatever. He didn't believe any of it based on whatever they were telling him. But then he was trying to impress me with the home that he had, which I have no interest in. But they also told him I'm a gold digger and I'm looking for this and that when I'm not. And I provide everything for myself in my own home. So, he went about this all wrong, still trying to schmooze me with like what his home looked like or what he had, when it's not even really his. Really, his daddy paid for it and then land contracted it to him. So me, I'm on my 4th home. Should already have like 10 homes. I should be at least 10 homes deep at this point, but I'm not because of the criminal escapades of my mother's crimes. But so these were all red flags. And then he just really assumed that that's what I was looking for. This was going to impress me somehow. When that would be like legitimately like trying to bring Cardi B over here to Lake Erie and Grosse Ile and say, "Hey, look at what I got." That would literally be the equivalent to that. And she would laugh in your face. So that's kind of what happened there in the beginning. And I'm just thinking, like, buddy, like I have way more than you on my own that I built on my own. Like, it was kind of funny, but I kept it to myself. And then he kept doing things, assuming I was just naive to all these different things regarding relationships or how things should be or how one would operate within a relationship. And I knew that. I knew that that's not how it worked. And, that just validated more how he's like faking this relationship every step of the way. And then, sorry, yeah, I can't really see. Yeah, so that happened like so many times where he assumed that that's what I was looking for. And I just kept kind of like shrugging it off. And then a few times he even asked like what I saw in him or why I was interested in him. And I literally said the same thing every time because I was drop dead serious. This is what I said. I said that or why I called him to my work. And I said, "Oh, I just wanted to see what you wanted," which was true. That is exactly why I called him there. But then he just continued to keep telling on himself. And I was already gathering the information on all these crimes for years, already had the woman involved documenting it for years, had already gone to the FBI. They're directing me what to do. I had already gone out with numerous other people who were a part of this and gathering the information from them directly as well. So this was not the first time I had done this, but I was serious. Like, I wanted to see what you wanted. I didn't say I thought you were good looking. I thought you were cute. Or anything that, like, people would say when a relationship would start. I didn't say any of those things. I was drop dead serious. So that was just the reality of the situation. But there was many things that he had done along the way because I have all of these serious matters at hand that are always ongoing because my mother's ongoing crimes and harassment. It creates extreme chaos within my life. And because of my injuries are part of those crimes, and the fallout from all that. It's created extreme disaster in my life, extreme chaos. I'm still living in it. It's never stopped. And I was living in the chaos prior. I just wasn't as injured. It was easier to accommodate prior to 10 years ago. But all of these problems have come out of my mother's escapades, crimes, and harassment, where this was all going on very heavily during this time. Problems with my older two kids, problems with all these different matters. And it's my mother's criminal actions at the root. So if someone was, interested in actually dating me or trying to start a relationship with me, you would definitely have to be able to handle some of these matters, or at least like stand by me and handle any of these matters. And he was not doing any of that. He was just like sitting back, acting all nonchalant, like, oh, whatever, like I didn't say anything. And now, so here I am trying to pick up all the pieces and I'm in all this chaos, and I am still picking up all the pieces today, and the chaos is never going to stop until arrests are made. But the way he was perceiving it, because of whatever he was being told, was that I'm just a hot mess running all over the place. I create problems for myself. I'm just this mess. And he was acting like I created all these problems for myself and I'm going nowhere, spinning in circles, that messes that I've caused. And that's not at all what's going on. Everything was 100% caused by my mother's crimes and the people helping her. So all of these problems I was having, a lot of these, abrupt situations would happen during this time. Like, they happen all the time. But they were still happening during this time. And his reaction during many of these situations that would happen was telling me even further like what he was doing, because he's not trying to like stand up and be a man or stand up and try to like help in any which direction. Even one little bit of help would be great. And he's not doing any of it. Just acting like this isn't my reality and whatever. So that was another really big red flag to all of that. Like, for real, if you were really interested in me and you were really, about starting a relationship with me and building with me, then you would be addressing some of this with me. I don't expect you to address all of it. I've been dealing with this for a very long time, but you would at least be doing some small fraction of it, which he did not do. So these were all big red flags. And he thought this was going to be a really easy job. He thought this was going to be real quick, real easy, because of whatever he was told about me, whatever false information they gave him. He thought that he was just going to be in and be able to knock me out, take care of all this, and they were going to get what they wanted and be on their way, and this was going to be real quick and easy. But because I'm the exact opposite of the person that was described to him, this was not working. So this traveled on for some months. It continued on for some months. And his behavior over the course of time, so his behavior is that of a 20 to 22-year-old still stuck in college. Now he has no kids. He's a year older than me. He has no kids. I have 2 grown kids. I have the 10-year-old. He's 10 now. So this was a few years ago. This was in 2023. But I'm a full-blown adult. I've been a full-blown adult with a mortgage since I was 18 years old. I had my first baby and my first home all in one weekend. And I've been a full-blown adult ever since. And if not, I've had more than one house and more than one kid. And now I've got 3 kids, and I had 2 kids, and then years later had another one. So I have 2 separate sets of kids. So he has no experience in any real life experience, any real life responsibilities, and instead was just acting like I have all these problems, but really it's my mother's crimes that exacerbated all these issues and caused some of these issues. And these are real life problems and stuff you have to deal with when you're a real adult that, runs business, has numerous streams of income, is raising kids, has adult kids. And then there's a lot of different things that have to stay running regarding those children, no matter what their age is. Like all of our benefits, our health insurance, our vision, dental, stuff like that, things that go on regarding vehicles and all of that. That's everything that's always been on my plate all these years. And he doesn't have any responsibilities, anything like that. So his mentality the entire time, everything he was doing, he was partying like he was still in college, 20 to 22 years old, getting drunk on the weekends and like hungover for days. And that's just how he was operating. And I don't do stuff like that. I'm all about my business. I'm permanently injured, chronically sick, picking up the pieces of all these disasters. I don't have time for that to fit into my life. So here I am just like operating everything on my own as I always have, like on this side. And he's just sitting there getting drunk, acting like what I have going on is like just some mess I created. When that's not at all what's going on here. I'm still building all this success. And what was going on in that moment is I was temporarily away from my home. And my next business moves should have taken place in 2022. The house I'm currently in should have already been an Airbnb, and I should have been on to the next home, and I shouldn't own the house in Ohio. And it was all due to my mother's crimes. So that's what should have been carried out. And that home should have been, that stream of income should have been running. And I should have been building on that next one using my entertainment income. And it would have worked very quickly between this house already being an Airbnb and my entertainment income. I would have gotten the next house and the next house very quickly and been retired. So I should have already retired from the entertainment industry 2 times at this point. And had to continue that stream of income even longer due to my mother's crimes and harassment. So each stream of income I've had to carry on longer than I would have in each industry along the way due to all those crimes and harassment. But I've always had stable income from the time I was 16 years old, always had solid, stable income, never been without, always had numerous streams of income. So that was another thing that he had mistaken about what I have going on in my life, just because he only saw the one stream of income in that moment or in that time period. He did not see all the other things going on in the background, going on around me. And then he made some type of remark at some point about all the paperwork that I have, because I always have a lot of ongoing paperwork. Well, that's because I'm a full-blown adult with numerous properties, numerous businesses. I have many things running, many streams of income, and I run everything within a household for all of these children. Even though 2 of these children are now adults, I have a lot of things running. And it's because of the amount of things that I have going on, the amount of streams of income and such, plus the problems my mother creates in those crimes. So it's all kind of intertwined, but I also have a lot of ongoing paperwork because being an adult and having everything running that I have running, there's a lot of paperwork involved. So he was trying to act like, I don't know if he just thought I was carrying around paperwork to carry around paperwork and look important, or if he just thought that like I'm just a mess and I have all this paperwork because I'm just this mess. But he's not a full-blown adult with all these responsibilities. He's not building anything and he's not going anywhere. He literally told me he had only had 5 employers to that point in his life. Whereas here I've had over 100 jobs and I've had many different businesses. And it's because if I go to work for somebody else, which I have not in a long time, they have to work for me. What they have going on in their establishment has to work with what I'm doing in my life. If it does not fit for me, I walk away. I'll work 1 or 2 days and walk away if it doesn't fit. And that's why I've worked in over 100 places. But he took that as that I don't have solid, stable income, or I'm just not like financially stable. when it's really the exact opposite. So I don't know what he was perceiving about all the paperwork that I have going on, but it's literally because I have so many things running and so many problems. And then I had all my insurance claims for my treatments because there were so many treatments. And then I ended up with an insurance claim on my home. And then everything in life that I have to run as a whole, which is always ongoing, that has to be kept up on because he doesn't have any of that in his life. He doesn't have to worry about any of that. So there was just numerous things here that were all red flags. Let me talk about some of these other red flags here. Um, mm, oh, okay. So one of the other things that you could tell that he was mistaken my my physical injuries, because I have 5 brain injuries, all left untreated within the medical system. I have used the hyperbaric oxygen treatments to regrow the brain tissue with during the initial period and then more after each re-injury. That is how the brain tissue heals and seals shut at a more rapid rate. It doesn't really seal with my injuries, won't seal without the treatment, but it does seal the brain tissue, begins to seal the brain tissue shut. It's a very mild, long process, and it takes years. And with me having so many repeated injuries, it was just ongoing. It's ongoing for so long, it's still ongoing. He was mistaking my physical brain injuries and my systemic toxicity because I'm overloaded with carbon monoxide at a cellular and tissue level. He was mistaking all of that for a mental disorder or some type of depression. And that's not at all what it is, because I have so many brain injuries and I'm like kind of slow to move sometimes. I can't always do things. I can't always get things done. I have to move at my own pace. I can't punch somebody's clock. And then I live in so much extreme pain. At times it waxes and wanes. Sometimes it's very extreme. Sometimes I'm incapacitated from it. Sometimes I can't even drive to get myself from point A to point B. And he was mistaking what I had going on regarding all the different symptoms I have, because I have internal symptoms. I have a lot of waves of extreme nausea. I have many different symptoms. But it's really the carbon monoxide overload and any small amounts I take in, along with any other particles of any kind, any flushing that may be going on from large companies and whatnot. There's many different exposures that can't be had, which is why my son and I live modified lives, and we just mainly stay homebound and we operate our lives out of our home, which is what we have done basically his entire life. So he's almost 10. We've lived here pretty much his entire life in this house, except for that year and a half period we were temporarily gone and in our house in Ohio, which was during the time that this was all going on, is when we were temporarily gone. So during that time period, my life was very chaotic. My dad had just become injured. I was running all over the place, but that's not our normal lives. And it was only going to be able to go on for a short period of time. And it was my mother's crimes that were creating a lot of this chaos in the running around. So normally we do stay homebound. We just limitedly go where we have to, and then we continue treating, and we're trying to get the rest of the brain tissue shut without taking in any exposures. So he was mistaking like what he saw in me as like a mental disorder or depression, especially because they were told that I had this ongoing mental disorder by my mother. And that's the reason that Charmaine was involved, not because I had brought her in to document the crimes, because I can't make police reports and such because they're involved in the crimes. But he had perceived, because of what was told, that that's what he saw within me, not the extreme physical injuries that I was suffering from for many years. And I had crossed many thresholds to even be able to go to somebody's house. It took me 4 years from the time of my extreme injury before I was able to meet a guy and spend the night at his house away from my home. 4 years. And then it was only like limited. Okay. So he misconstrued all of it and was not seeing like the reality of the situation. And then at one point, I was explaining to him in the very beginning, like, hey, if you're going to date me, you need to learn about the condition, what we have going on. It's very serious. It's very life threatening. And I gave him the name of it. It's technically called muces, which is caused by severe carbon monoxide poisoning specifically. And people do have other forms of multiple chemical sensitivity, but it's not called muces. It's just multiple chemical sensitivity. And that's pertaining to any other way that your system took an abundance of some type of toxin or poison in. But with us, it's specifically called muces, caused by carbon monoxide poisoning directly, and especially because it was left untreated, which then settled into a cellular and tissue level. So when any small amount gets added to it, we get extremely unwell. The particles load up in our brain tissue, or it depends on how much we took in, floods our entire system, goes through our entire system, because that brain tissue is still open in the front. My son's is not all the way sealed shut yet either, but more sealed than mine. And it's because I've been re-injured so many times. So he pretended to understand it, and then he actually tried to act like somebody told me I had this and it's not that big of a deal. It's not somebody that told me I had it. We were in a very extreme state for a very long time. Couldn't even leave home for over 3 years. Could barely get dinner cooked. I couldn't have any household cleaner for almost 4 years. It was very extreme. And it's because of the amount of treatments I've had that it's been significantly reduced, but there's still a problem. It is still very life threatening. It can be. And he was just acting like I was over exaggerating and it's not real, or my injuries aren't real, because this is the information he's operating on is also coming from my mother and the criminal group of people she's operating with. But that is our reality. We are very sick from it. It's not something somebody told me. I was well aware that we had this issue. I just didn't know there was a name for it. And a couple years down the line, I did find that there was a name for it. And that's why I gave him the name of it. So it's not just like that we're 100 times more sensitive to like chemicals and stuff. No, like our brain tissue is wide open. Everything goes in and loads up, and it hurts in an extreme manner. And then those particles all flood the system. They stay loaded up in the brain, and if there's enough, it then floods the system, and it stays until we have enough hyperbaric oxygen treatments to remove what we took in just from that exposure to get us back to where we were before that exposure. So he mistook like, what he was saying and didn't want to believe the injuries were real, because they were also telling him this. They were telling him I was getting ripped off by the center. None of what happened to me happened. I'm known to lie all the time. And none of that was reality. So also at one point, he did want to try the treatment, and he wanted to follow me around for the day, like a day in the life of my chaotic life, like acting like it's entertainment for him. And again, this is not my real life. This is me temporarily being away from my home with my mother, causing all these problems and all this chaos, and we're running around. And leading up to that, the previous like 6 years, we had been completely homebound, not going anywhere. And 6, 7 years, I think it was like 7 years. And we had not gone anywhere at all the whole time. We're literally limitedly just going one place, barely getting back, going one place, barely getting back. That's how it was the whole time. So this was the beginning of us starting to go out into the world. And because of my dad's injury, we were excessively running all over the place. And because of my injury, and I had to make it to Troy, Michigan or Brighton, Michigan for treatment, which is an hour away each. That's what was going on. And so he did sign up to do one of the treatments, but then I put my name on the line for him to do that treatment. He said he was going to do it. And then he ended up not filling out the paperwork when I already verified that he'd be there. Well, with how the center operates, now they're closed down. They're all over the news, but they're so strict, and we need treatment for life. And if you miss your treatment, you have to pay out of pocket cash for that missed treatment, even though you didn't fill out your paperwork and didn't do what you were supposed to or missed the treatment. And I wasn't going to be paying cash for his the games he was playing. And he was just acting like, oh, well, I didn't do it. I didn't have time. Like, well, no, this isn't a joke. This isn't some game. Like, this is my life. This is very serious. And we need treatment for life. And I'll be damned. You think I'm not going to pay $200 for a missed treatment because you decided that you're just suddenly not going to do it. It's not optional. So then I made him sit down and fill out the paperwork, since he had already verified that he was coming the next day. Because my money's not going to go on the line for that. So he thought all of this a joke. Me running all over the place during this time frame was a joke. And I really wasn't running as much as I probably would have been, because I couldn't make it that far because of all my brain injuries. I only have so much functioning. So I was spending the weekdays on my friend's couch for that entire year until I got back to my home here in Michigan. So he wasn't like seeing any of this or seeing the reality or the bigger picture of what was actually going on. So during all this, he was actually acting like, even though I had explained we'd been under treatment all these years, treatment can't stop. I barely kept us alive. I have to make it to work every weekend, bare minimally. Every Friday and Saturday night, I have to make it to work, but really like Thursday, Friday, Saturday is usually what I do. I can always replace that Thursday with another day. But at bare minimum, that has to happen, because that's how we maintain staying alive. The treatments cannot stop, and we still have to get back to regular daily treatment for some time. And he was just acting like that was like it was all a joke, or like I was lying about it or something. And then at one point I had said something about the condition, like about a month in or so, and he was just like, oh, we need to get you oxygen. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm already under treatment, hyperbaric oxygen. I'm poisoned at a tissue and cellular level. It's got to be pressurized out of the system. And I've been under treatment for years. It had been over 5 years at this point. And had well over 100 grand out of pocket. And so he was just acting like this was some type of joke, and like none of that mattered, or I was just making it up. And he's looking at all that money that was spent, all that time was spent and lost to get me to where I barely was in that moment, in my system, in my brain being extremely fragile, and me being extremely limited. And he was judging it on what I looked like and the false information he was told, not the reality of the situation. So that's going to be it for part one, and I'm going to come back and do a part two on this right away. Thanks. Bye.